Number 18. Michael Eads says, I've heard some Christian songs say Christ was nailed to a tree instead of a cross. Would you happen to know why the two terms are interchanged? So Michael, this one's easy for me here. So they're interchanged in the Bible. In the Bible, we have texts that say he was nailed to a tree, and others that say he was nailed to a cross. And to understand this, you have to understand that they don't mean the tree and the cross like they're two different things. They mean them like they're the same thing, because a cross is very large pieces of wood, probably the trunk of a tree. And so he's nailed to a tree. It's just not a tree that's alive and planted and growing in the ground. He's nailed to a tree in that sense. The cross is a tree. And one of the reasons why the blurring of a tree versus a cross, I think, has happened is because of a prophecy. I'll call this typology more in the Old Testament with Deuteronomy. In Deuteronomy, the Jews are told that if a person is killed by execution, so they would usually stone them, generally speaking. There were other things, but usually it's stones. Then they would hang them on a tree. This was just expected in the culture of the Middle East at the time. A person who was executed was put on display as a deterrent for everyone else. But God didn't want that person staying on the tree. They would hang him up on a tree. So he tells them, if a person is executed and hung on a tree, don't leave them overnight. Take them down off of that tree and bury them, because I don't want to defile the land with just dead bodies just hanging there, right? God doesn't want to do that. You've dealt justice, fine. You showed everybody this has happened. Now take him down and bury him. So he changed that practice. Now, when you come to the Septuagint, this is like the Greek translation of the Old Testament. The Deuteronomy passage is translated a little differently, and they translate it as though it refers to crucifixion. This is really neat history stuff. So the more Greek Jews, they're looking at that Deuteronomy passage, which was probably a stoning, and then they were hung on a tree, and more often than not that they couldn't have been hung by their neck on the tree, but more often than not, stoning and then hung on the tree. In this case, we're looking at the tree as a way of killing someone, as a way of not only killing them, but also leaving their bodies up on display afterwards, which is what God doesn't want. So that's how they translate that Deuteronomy passage in the Septuagint. Then you get to the time of Jesus, and they look at this and they say, hey, this is all about Christ. They go, look, God says the person hanging on a tree is cursed. Jesus, and this is what Paul does in Galatians, I think it's Galatians 2, Jesus, he became a curse for us on the cross. Just like the person hanging on a tree is cursed because they've experienced the death penalty, Jesus became the curse, took the curse of Adam of sin and death, and he bore it on the cross. He died, and the person hanging on the tree is cursed. It was a picture meant to draw like our eyes open to see the depth of the death of Christ, that he dies for all of us as a penalty, a punishment, a curse to suffer for our sins that we've committed. So he dies on a tree. So the blurring is intentional. It's legitimate because trees and crosses are made of the same material. But it's intentional because it's meant to show the typology of Jesus becoming cursed for us on the cross. I think it's neat stuff. So I still want to blur it, not confuse it, not like we're saying things wrong, but I want to like make sure we keep in front of our minds that symbolism that's there in the Deuteronomy passage.